Today on our 2013 Toyota Sienna, we're going to be installing the AirLift 1000 Air Helper springs for coil springs on the rear of the vehicle, part number AL60732. Now we're going to go ahead and run the vehicle through our test course, and we'll show you a comparison with factory suspension versus with airbags installed. You'll notice how much better the vehicle handles and how much less body roll there is with the airbags installed on the vehicle. Now before we install our new AirLift Air Helper springs, we're going to go ahead and take a few measurements. This is the vehicle. This measurement here is no weight in the back of the vehicle with factory suspension. So we'll measure from the ground to the bottom of the wheel well. We're at about 30 inches. Now we've gone ahead and added about 550 pounds to the back of the van. Now let's go ahead and take another measurement with the weight in the van and with the stock suspension. Now when we measure from the ground to the bottom of the wheel well, we're just over 28 inches. So we've gone down approximately 2 inches. Now we've gone ahead and installed our airbags. We have approximately 30 psi in each of the airbags, and we've put our weight back into the back of the vehicle, about 550 pounds. We'll go ahead and take another measurement. Now from the ground to the bottom of the wheel well, we're right around 29 inches. Now to begin our installation, we're going to need to go up underneath the vehicle. Now today we're using a set of lifts to raise the vehicle up, and we're going to be using a pole jack to raise the body of the vehicle up to open up our suspension or to take the weight off of each of the coil springs. Now at home you can simply set your vehicle on a set of jack stands and use an additional floor jack or a jack to raise and lower the suspension as needed. We'll go ahead and take our pole jack. We'll slide up underneath the vehicle here. Now as we raise our pole jack and lift the body of the vehicle up, you'll notice how the coil springs are opening up. We've got a larger gap now that'll allow us to slip the airbags into position. Next we're ready to prepare our airbags to be installed. Next we're going to need to take one of our airbags. You notice that there's a little plastic cap on top of the air fitting. Go ahead and take that off for now. We're going to need to collapse the bag, essentially roll the bag up so that all the air is pushed out of it. Once we have it in position, we'll go ahead and put the rubber cap back on it so that the bag is compressed. Now that we have our airbag compressed down, go ahead and slide it up into the spring. With our bag inside the spring, go ahead and pull the cap off. So it works down to the bottom here. For now, we're going to go ahead and put our cap back on to keep anything from possibly falling into the bag. We'll go ahead and repeat the same process over on the passenger side. Next, we're going to take our airline hose. We're going to route it up here over the top, come down through the hole, the top here of the coil spring mount. Go ahead and thread it through the protector of this piece of rubber is what it actually is. Go ahead and slide it up into position. Next, we're going to need to install one of the clamps that secures the hose to the barb. Now to install these clamps on the hose, you want to take a pair of pliers and open up the clamp. Then slide it onto the hose about like that. Now to make the hose slide onto the barb on the top of the bag a little easier, if you soak it in some hot water for a couple minutes, it'll soften it up and it'll slide right on real easy. Next we can go ahead and set our hot water aside. We'll pull the protective rubber plug off of the top of our airbag. So now that we have our air hose all the way down on the fitting, go ahead and take our pliers. We'll need to move the clamp down on top of it. Now that we've got our clamp seated, go ahead and pull the extra air hose up and put the protector down over the top of the valve, like that. Next, we'll go ahead and take our air line, and we're going to route it over towards the passenger side, making sure we stay away from any areas that have moving parts, become hot, or have very sharp edges, as all of these could easily damage the airline tubing. We're going to go ahead and use a few zip ties to help secure our airline tubing as we route it over to the passenger side. Now the kit does come with hardware to where you can install 2 inflation valves where you can independently adjust the pressure in the airbags. Now for this application, we're going to go ahead and use the T-fitting that comes with the kit and run both of our airlines together and then out to a single airline fitting to adjust the pressure in the bags. This way, when you put air in or remove air, it'll give you equal pressure in both bags. Now we found when routing our airline tubing that there's a couple spots that the airline could be damaged because there is a little bit of a sharp edge. So to help protect it, we're going to use a couple sections of 1/4-inch wire loom. This is part number 7509-10. Go ahead and put a couple zip ties on our line to help keep it in place. Now, as we said earlier, we're going to be installing the T-fitting into our lines that's supplied with the kit. That way we just have one valve to inflate or deflate the bags. So we're going to go ahead and cut our airline tubing over on this side, about in this area. We'll then go ahead and repeat the same process for the passenger side airbag for connecting the airline to it. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our airline here. We're going to cut it to length. Now that we have our length cut on both sides of the airline, we're ready to add in our T-fitting. Before we do that, we're going to go ahead and take these 2 little clamps and slide one on each side. Now that we have our clamp installed on each airline, next we're going to need to use the hot water method again to help soften up the airline so that it slides onto the T-fitting. Now that we have the one side airline installed, we can go ahead and slide the clamp down into position. Then we'll go ahead and repeat the same process over on the other side. Now that we have each of our airbags in and the airlines routed out of the top of them, we're going to go ahead and remove this pole jack just to get it out of the way. Next, we're going to need to add another clamp to our long section of hose still. We'll need to soak this in hot water as well, as this half here will connect with this half right here. Next, we'll go ahead and install our airline onto the T-fitting. And then we can slide the clamp up into position. Next, we're going to need to route our airline tubing to our chosen location that we'll be putting the valve. Now we've chose to run along the back side here on the right side of the vehicle, and ultimately we're going to go to this grommet right here. Now where this grommet is on the bottom of the jack compartment. So we're actually going to run our wire up into where the jack is held here on the right hand side of the interior of the van at the back. There's a place in there where we'll be mounting our valve, but in order to get there we're going to need to route the airline across across a couple areas that have some sharp edges. So we're going to go ahead and again slide a piece of 1/4 inch wire loom over the top of the airline hose to give it a little more protection. Next, we'll go ahead and route our airline along the underside of the passenger side. Next, we're going to need to use a couple loom clamps to help secure our wire and keep it up out of the way so that it doesn't move around too much. Now, the metal loom clamp that we'll be using is part number A0500. We'll also be using a couple self-tapping screws to attach the clamp to the vehicle. The self-tapping screws that we'll be using today are part number 101, 131, 802. Go ahead and take our loom clamp, we'll put it around our airline tubing. Then we're going to attach it to the vehicle using this self-tapping screw. To make things a little easier, we're going to go ahead and use the self-tapper to get the screw hole pre-drilled so we don't twist the air tubing up at all. We'll then go ahead and add our 3rd loom clamp right up in here to help secure the airline tubing. Go and figure out where we want to be at first. Now that we have our airline tubing routed to the back corner of the vehicle, while we're underneath the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and finish up the installation of our heat shield. We'll go right here on the exhaust pipe, protecting the airbag from the heat from the exhaust. Now, this heat shield is bendable. You will kind of form it a little bit. Now to install these, you bend this middle tab in, bend it back like that, creating an air space between the heat shield and the exhaust pipe. It'll be something like that. Now the heat shield will attach to the exhaust using a hose clamp. Go ahead and get each of the hose clamps started. Go ahead and thread them down some as well. Go ahead and tighten down one hose clamp. Go ahead and repeat the same process for the other one. Now you'll notice we have a lot of excess hose clamp. Now to keep things from making noise and vibrating, I'm going to just take a pair of tin snips and trim it down. Go ahead and do that for the other one as well. And then back here at this back corner, where we routed the airline tubing through the frame, again you can see we got a piece of wire loom over the hose to help protect it. We'll go ahead and use a zip tie here to help secure it off. We'll then go up into the vehicle and clean out the jack area so we can gain access to this plug right here. So now we've gone ahead and opened up the rear of the hatch, and we've gone ahead and cleaned out the jack from the area here on the passenger side rear. The grommet that we'll be using is right here. We're just going to reach in and pull the grommet out. I'm then just going to reach underneath the vehicle and I'm going to push the airline tubing up through the grommet. Next, there's a couple different ways that you can put a hole in this grommet to allow the airline to pass through. You can cut it in half and slip it around the airline tubing, or you can take a razor knife and just cut a small little X in it, allowing you to push the airline tubing through it. I think that's what we're going to do. Now we've gone ahead and pulled the airline tubing through the grommet and then slid the grommet back into position. Next, we're going to go ahead and route our airline tubing up. We're going to use this hole right here to attach our valve. So we're going to go ahead and leave ourselves a little bit of extra airline tubing. Go ahead and take our cutters. Cut the tubing to length. Then need to take one of the squeeze clamps. We need to add that to the end of our airline. We'll then need to soak it in the hot water again. Next, we'll go ahead and take our valve here, slide the air hose onto it, and then bring the clamp down. Secure that in place as well. I'm then going to take a hex nut, thread it onto the valve, put a star washer, we'll then need to reach in, put it through the fitting like that. Next, we'll need to add the rubber washer here on the front side. We'll then put another flat washer. And finally, a hex nut. And you can put your cover onto the valve. Next, we'll go ahead and use a couple zip ties to help secure the airline tubing to keep things from moving around and possibly making noise. And then go ahead and trim off any excess zip tie. Now we've gone ahead and reinstalled the jack back into position. You can see right here is our valve. We can then go ahead and put the cover back on. Next, we're going to go ahead and need to fill up our airbags so that we can test for leaks. Now keep in mind that these airbags have a maximum pressure of 35 psi. With our airbags pressured up, we can go ahead and check the pressure using our gauge. Now that we have our desired pressure, next we're going to go ahead and spray down the connection points with a soapy water solution and check for bubbles. And that'll do it for the installation of the AirLift 1000 Air Helper springs for coil springs in the rear of the vehicle, part number AL60732 on our 2013 Toyota Sienna.